Okay, guys, welcome back to the Mastery Podcast. Now, I'm very excited and selfishly for myself because I played rugby for many years. So, probably the first 40 minutes of this podcast, I just want to talk about the sport that this gentleman was very well known for. But I've known about him for a long time. Our paths have crossed, and I've known they've crossed, but I've never actually spoken to you properly. So I'm delighted, selfishly for me, to have a great opportunity to have a conversation with you, but also for everybody listening. Your success has been incredible throughout your journey, and I'm really looking forward to interviewing you. So welcome, Ollie Marchon.
It's great to be here, mate, and echo that. I think I've known about you since I first came into the industry. So to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to you, mate, is something I'm looking forward to.
No, 100%. And I go to events and I hear and I see and I speak to a lot of coaches, and there's so many people that are like, "Have you ever interviewed Ollie Marchon? Have you ever sat and talked to him?" I was like, "No," but it's as I said to you, my interview series now is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. But as you know, I'm sure with business opportunities for you, they come and go, and you're like, "Oh, do I have the time to be able to commit to do it?" And you were very, honest with me. It's like you probably don't have a lot of time to be sitting doing interviews every day of the week, right?
Well, yeah, I've done a few over the last couple of years. I think obviously the popularity of interviews and podcasts was probably spurred on by everything that happened in 2020, and people having a bit more time and thinking about ways that they could get their message out there and keep their brand moving forward with their services closed down. And people had a lot of time to listen to podcasts, and it was very easy to set them up. So I was on a few back then. I'm actually similar to you, launching my own. Or, yours is obviously out there now, and you're having some success with it. I've recorded about 8 episodes, so I'm trying to just limit the amount I go on podcasts, so I can reserve some of the bits for myself and the guests that I'm bringing on, and I'm not repeating the same stuff, because I think that's obviously a danger when you're doing too many podcasts. You can sometimes repeat yourself. Um, Again, depending on who's doing the interview and kind of what they're looking to dive into. So but like I said to you, mate, when you reached out, the opportunity to come on with you is something that I jump at, because I think you're someone that's, if I think about my early days in the career, when you're looking down, sort of what does it look like in the future? Who's kind of been there before you, and who's relevant? There's the likes of yourself and Phil Lerney, who I've got close to a little bit more recently because our paths have crossed. The old guard that are still pushing and doing such great things in the industry, but the people that we looked up to as we came into it. So to sit down and understand, how you've managed to stay in and still be so relevant is something that I'm looking to get from you here as well. So it's a little bit selfish on my behalf.
No. It's wonderful, because the relevance thing is something I'm going to touch on a little bit later with personal branding and really understanding that. But selfishly for me, the first place I want to start, which is amazing, is your kind of journey in rugby, because that was obviously a big part of your journey. I personally, when I was 18, 19, played for Leicester Tigers for a very short stint before I got that. Am I on the edge of wanting to do this pro thing and try? Not that I did, but try. But rugby was a big part of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lifetime ago, and I actually bumped into someone yesterday, and we got into it because he knew me from rugby. But it was very much an identity that I was obsessed with from a young age. In my early teens, wanting to be a professional athlete. I didn't really care what sport it was. It was football, really, at first, because of the heroes and the idols that I sort of looked up to, and I was around football from an early age. As I moved to secondary school, the main sport was rugby, so I started playing a bit of rugby, and I was excelling more in rugby than football. It's probably a little bit less competitive in terms of the amount of people that play it, but it's equally at the top end. It's a very demanding sport, but lucky to be picked up by a professional outfit in Saracens, like Leicester, a great club, a really good academy system. And like I said, it was just an obsession with wanting to be a professional athlete. I was so into PE, being outside, playing with any ball, racket. And I think it was a lifestyle that I perceived of being a professional athlete. I knew that it would be something that I could wake up and I'd love doing it every day. Football, obviously, when you're young, you think about the cars and the houses and the glamour. Rugby is a very different proposition when you get into it. But yeah, for I think between 14 and I retired quite early, about 26 or 27. Rugby and being a rugby player and that title of being a professional athlete was all that I aspired to be. And perhaps at times I was a little bit too obsessive over it. And I think you soon realize as you get a little bit older, and now at the age I am at 35, you have a bit more perspective about the mindset and what you were thinking at that sort of time and why you were thinking it. Um, but I managed to come out of it the other side because my journey into rugby and when I was a professional, it was quite a broken career. I was in the game full time, and then I was out of it with injuries, and then I was back into it. And in that time, I'd studied, I'd been to university, and I'd started my personal training business alongside it. So I was quite lucky that I had rugby and I had fitness in the background, and fitness was a bit of a side hustle at the time because rugby was still the passion. But when I got to that 26, 27 years old, I was very, very ready to leave the game because I'd done all that I wanted to do, and I was a little bit disenchanted with it, and the injuries that I'd got. And I'd had some success with personal training and fitness, that I had something that I could move into that was starting to earn good money. And I was really passionate about it too. So I know a lot of athletes come towards the end of their career and a little bit lost and don't really know what to go into, and they kind of fall into something because someone drags them in. But I was quite fortunate that I'd had fitness the whole way through rugby, and it was a seamless sort of transition out of it.
Do you think that that seamless transition at that stage of your journey, and I talk to coaches a lot about this, was there any conscious decisions that you were making at that time that were shaping, okay, now rugby's here, I'm going to move into personal training? You said that there was like quite seamless. I always ask this question because I like to see how intentional people are at certain stages, because I see it as quite an entrepreneurial trait. You know, I'm an athlete, I'm a professional athlete, I'm making this switch to personal training. Or was it just, okay, this seemed like a good fit, I love fitness, I'm going to be a personal trainer?
I think everything I've done is been fairly conscious. If I think about my upbringing and life within rugby, but before rugby, come from a very successful family on my dad's side, different culture. So he's from a place called Goa in India, but he's a mix of Portuguese and Goan, but very different culturally to how people are over here. He was a surgeon, came to the UK and was an orthopedic surgeon, very successful guy. And his brothers and sisters were very successful in their own right. They all live in Dubai, actually, I think where you are, but they all live out in Dubai, and run businesses. So growing up, it was my father he was a disciplinarian. We were very disciplined, and it was all about academics. And he sort of instilled a work ethic in me where I had to work really hard for whatever it is that I wanted.
Right.
But I always often got what I wanted through hard work. So I never spoiled, always had to earn what the things that we were given. But it was just this hard work and effort resulted in a reward. So when I was in rugby, the environment was where I excelled because it was a high performing environment. And the people around me, the other players, the coaches, it was all high performance, particularly more so in the early days at Saracens, but more so with England Sevens, which is where I probably had the most success in my career, representing your country, high pressure, but high performance. And then when I was getting towards a stage where if I was looking into the future with where my rugby career could go, the rewards just didn't seem to match the effort that I was putting in and the age in which I was getting to. And you start to think about, what does my life look like in my late 20s and 30s? And I'd always been thinking about what success looked like in terms of like an image, whether it was monetary, whether it was sort of lifestyle I was living, whether it was a business venture that I had. Like, what I didn't want to be 30 and starting a career from scratch again. That didn't seem right to me. I probably could have accepted that if I'd had a 10, 15-year career in rugby at the top level and been a superstar, but that wasn't me. I was an all right player that had a bit of success, but was never going to be a household name. So I think just being quite self-aware about what it is that I wanted and where I was in my rugby career, I was able to make very conscious decisions about what was the next logical step. And like I said, luckily, whilst at the time the injuries and going away to uni and things didn't seem like they were lucky things to me, I had things that I could fall back on, which meant that I could dive into those and immerse myself and then have some success in other industries.
Where do you think the ability to ask these questions, you said with your father and family and everybody's successful, I remember being 24, starting my personal training career, and I was like, okay, who do I want to be in this gym? I'm like, okay, I want to have better results, charge more, and be better, more popular. So my first goal was reputation, results, and money. Like, in terms of, I played a good level of rugby. I wanted the credibility. I wanted to be the best known trainer in the gym, another level of credibility. It clearly, to you, was either operating at the highest performance or even having something that you deem to be success. And one of the questions I had for you is that at that point, and even now, what is success to you? Is it more to do with constant progression, or is it operating at the highest level? Because you were asking it of yourself then, right? You were asking it of yourself at the highest level.
Yeah, I think my relationship with like success and money and those things is probably different to a lot of people. But again, with perspective and looking back at my behaviors growing up, I took my first job at 14. And I probably was in some sort of employment, or I was earning money from 14 forever, sometimes 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever I could. And you speak to sort of classic entrepreneurs, and that's sort of a normal story, but I wasn't doing it for the same reasons they were. I just knew that having that independence and working hard and getting a reward for it was something that gave me fulfillment. I think now when I look at success, or why am I still driven the way I am, for me, it's more about the shame that I would feel if I didn't reach my potential. I don't really know what that potential is yet, but because I've had injuries, and some of the injuries that I've had or setbacks that I've had have sometimes been through my own, not necessarily wrongdoing, but not putting the effort in that was required. You know, I remember the first conversation I had with Saracens. I snapped my cruciate ligament and my lateral, so I completely blew my knee out 9 months into my contract. Now, I'm not to say that I could have been kept on if I'd have done something differently, but I remember them saying, "You haven't quite done enough for us to want to extend your contract given the extent of your injury." And that to me was like, well, I could have probably done more then. Again, I was going to be out for 12 months, so who knows whether they've kept me on, but I hadn't done enough for them to want to feel like they would keep me on for another 12 months, because the other side of that, they felt as though I was going to be something of value to them. So, and that's just one example of many things that where I've just been like, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want anything to be left to chance now. And I think now where we are with our business, because we've got such a great opportunity, and I'm so passionate about the fitness industry and the opportunities for young coaches coming up, and the opportunities that I've afforded myself. And, you know, we've got 25 employees now. The opportunities that the young coaches and creatives and stuff that we've got on our business, the opportunities that we've got through hard work, I almost want to see just how far we can take it. Mm-hmm. And again, along the way, you're going to pick up bigger paychecks, and there's more, you know, it gets more exciting, and there's more financial freedom and security. But I believe if we just keep doing really good work with the best intentions, those things come as a byproduct. It's like the classic cliche you sell to your coaches, right? So it's about the journey, not the destination. You know, focus on lifting weights and eating the right things, and your body composition is going to change, and you're going to start looking better as a byproduct. I very much believe that if I keep showing up, working really hard, be passionate about the work that I'm doing, and it's all coming from a place of good intention with a good understanding of how we can have the most impact, the rewards will come. That might change, mate. Like, I'm 35, 3 kids. It may all change. Like, people often say, like, what's the end goal? Are you looking for an exit? Is it, you know, what's the 5-year plan? Those things could change. But right now I feel like I have the energy and passion to try and stay in the game as long as I can, so long as I can stay relevant and credible and still have, you know, a positive impact on the industry.
You seem to be somebody who, and this fascinates me because this has always been so important to me. I want to have great relationships. I want to build a great business. I want to serve a large number of people. I want to have my physical health and be in shape. You know, I'm 46 now, and being the way I am is so important to me. And there's a lot of people who are like, you know, I have to put so much of my life on hold if I just want to build that thing. I want to put something on hold if I just want to build that thing. From watching you, the family, the time with the family, the building the businesses, the fitness at the highest level, everything that you're doing. How have you managed to be able to visibly from the outside in, keep it all? Because people think things have to disappear. You can't be a great husband or parent or partner if you're trying to build this big empire, this big vision. How does Ollie keep all this afloat?
So I think the first thing to take notice of is the fact that everything that people see now, if they're new to, whether it's, you know, they're a new follower or they've heard about us and they click on the pages and they sort of kind of work out that we're doing all these different things. What's very important to recognize is that, going back to what I said about rugby, I started my personal training business at about 21. So when I graduated from university, I'm 35. So it's about 15 years in the making, you know, where it is today. The other thing I'll say is that, again, I reference the fact that we've got a fairly large team for the sort of niche business that we are, or the small business that we are. So it's a collection of people that influence the success that we're having, or the perceived success based on the amount of media that we might put out there. So I can't take the credit for it. I've referenced this on another podcast, where I often find that I'm just riding the wave of the people that are sort of keeping the wave and the current moving forward within the Marchon business. So whether that's in a professional sense, we've got a collection of really world leading coaches in terms of their mindset and who they want to be in the industry, which has meant that, if I'm honest, I'm probably one of the poorest coaches now in terms of my credibility, because I haven't practiced coaching for 3-4 years. Yeah. I can still stand on the coaching floor and do it, but the guys that are coaching in our gyms, the guys that are doing our online programming, they are day in, day out educating themselves, staying at the forefront of literature and coaching every day and programming. So those guys take care of that. We've got a creative team that, you know, look after brand and marketing, that give us a perception and help us put media out there that is brilliant, right? That's not me editing videos. And it's across the board, there's the specialists in each division. So I think that certainly helped. I think from a personal standpoint, again, in the same vein, my wife she's a dedicated full-time mother who is very supportive of me. She's been she's been with me for such a long time. She's kind of grown with the business, and her capacity for understanding what the business demands of me has grown with that too. So she understands that there's going to be times where I can really focus on the family, and there's going to be times where I'm not going to be there much, which has its positives and negatives, right? That lifestyle's not for everyone, and I would never try and impart knowledge that you should try and emulate what I do to grow a business, because there are some guys out there and women out there that have much more time with their kids, and that's potentially a much healthier balance of family and work life. But weekends and days in which I'm around, and I put a lot of stuff on social media. So I think that what people consume is probably they see the best of it, right? Whereas there are days at the moment, you know, I reference some Soho house at the moment. We've just taken a residency here, so we've started a little studio. It's Monday to Friday. I'm leaving the house at 5, getting home at 9, not seeing the kids all week. And it's been like that for a few weeks now. So weekends is where I fill my cup up with them.
So when it comes to a coach, essentially, and this is important, there's a big challenge in the fitness industry we face with imposter syndrome. And whether we call it imposter syndrome or whether it's just looking at somebody and not having what I think is, when people have imposter syndrome, it's normally that they don't have a sense check on who they are. They're almost looking at somebody else going, I need to be them. To a coach who's seeing all this from the outside, let's take a little step back, which is really important. The reality of what it takes to get to where you are right now. You started as a PT. And if I'm right, were you focusing more on your PT, and was it physiques rather than the hybrid style training you were doing, or like where were you? Because I'd like to paint a little bit of a picture of how all this business success has unfolded, right back from how you're managing today to how it started and looked.
Yeah, that's probably really relevant to your audience. So back then, as you know, the fitness industry was coaching was very much around physiques. So a lot of the coaches who were well established in mainstream fitness, so I'm talking about people outside of strength and conditioning and sport, the fitness industry was very much about aesthetics, and bodybuilding was the modality of training that most people used as their gym work, right? So I'd come from a rugby background where strength and conditioning had a massive influence on not just the way I looked, but the way I moved and the way I viewed fitness. I really loved being in the gym because of the impact it had on my performance on the rugby field. I also, as a young lad, wanted to have big biceps and a big chest and look the part and fill my t-shirt out and look good on the beach. So I kind of had adopted, talking about this hybrid training, I kind of adopted the strength conditioning and bodybuilding philosophy and built, and my sort of original fitness business was called Functional Physiques. So it was just a play on
by the way, Ollie, I remember when that first started. I remember I remember that name, and I remember when people were like, ooh, I just don't feel like I'm doing enough by just lifting. And I remember when that all started to come in.
Exactly. And I used to come to Body Power, and I would look the same as some of the other physique models on the stands. and they'd all be like, "Yeah, oh, you are 2 weeks out from a show. When are you competing?" And I've never competed. It was never really something that I wanted to do. But to bring it back to where we were with that, so my philosophy on fitness was all about getting people moving really well, getting them strong, getting them fit. Influence on S&C, but aesthetics was still where most people's head was at when it came to what their goals were. There wasn't Hyroxes, there wasn't turf games, there wasn't really much that people were trying to go and compete in outside the gym, which meant their training would have some substance inside the gym. In terms of my coaching, as I said, PE was something I really excelled in at school. I thought that if I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, I was going to be a PE teacher. When I went to Saracens at 18 years old, they made us enroll in a college course. So I did my YMCA gym instructors course at North Harts College. It was because they were saying to us, not everyone's going to make it. You need to continue with your education. When I got that injury, the most logical thing for me was to go to university. And again, the pressures from family or my dad to continue education were, were quite big. And sports science was, again, the only thing that resonated, right? PE was something I was passionate about. Sport was something I was passionate about. Let's go and do sports science, as probably most people go and do that don't really know what they should do at university, but enjoy sport. So I went and did sports science, and I was really, really excelling in, I loved all of it. Loved anatomy, physiology, loved biomechanics. I was recovering from the knee injury. I started playing rugby again. There was a strength and conditioning coach that was looking after the sports teams, and he had a massive impact on my ability to get back on the rugby field. So again, there's just this connection to this coaching thing that this guy was doing with me that I was like, fuck, he's got me back from this injury, and my career could start again on the rugby field. So when I finished university, I did very well, got a first class degree with honours. Again, the reason I say this is not to brag about my degree, because I haven't actually used it. It's more about the mindset behind, if you're going to do something, particularly it's going to cost you about 20 grand of debt, you make sure that you come out having done yourself justice. Like, I've never wanted to do anything that's going to waste time, going to cost me money, where I'm not going to come out with a result that's going to be favorable. So I came out with a good degree. When I finished that, this same strength and conditioning coach, he was working for a company that basically they plugged that company into universities, and they delivered the strength and conditioning for the rugby, the football, the netball, the lacrosse, all those sports. And they were doing an internship. So I had this sports science degree and then took this internship, which was like a practical master's in strength and conditioning. We did our UKSCA qualifications all the weekends. We were given, as part of it, we were given our NASM personal training qualification, performance exercise specialist, corrective exercise specialist. So in that year, I went and set up in the first term, so between October and Christmas, was when we got all the NASM PT quals. And the second bit was going to be then the UKSCA. So by December, I was qualified as a PT. And I would basically, where I lived in Hertfordshire, I set up as a freelance personal trainer in the local leisure centre from day one, paying rent, and just started off freelance. I knew I didn't want to work for them because I knew the calibre of coaches, having trained in that gym, and that wasn't the path I wanted to take. So started playing rugby again with a semi-pro club, set up this PT business in this local leisure centre, and then I would commute up to Nottingham to do for this year of practical masters twice a week. Got very busy in the gym very quickly as a PT. I cold called. I remember my first day, I said to the membership team, can I have, GDPR wasn't a thing back then, can I have 3 months of the latest members that have joined the gym? I'm going to call them all and just give them a free session. So cold called all these new members, and would just be on the gym floor delivering free consultations and sessions. I all of a sudden looked like the busiest personal trainer. I was in shape. I knew what I was talking about. I'd got the degree. I was very passionate about coaching. I wasn't making much money because it was all free at that time, but eventually it all started to click, and I got very busy very quickly, and soon became the trusted expert in the gym, charging the most money and the busiest, and was getting the best results. Finished that masters a year later, probably did another year in that gym, probably 18 months, saved some cash, and then I started my own studio. And it was a converted cattle shed on a farm. There was actually a small studio that myself and this other guy went in on with the intentions of starting a business together. That all kind of fell apart in terms of starting a business together, but we ended up running our own businesses separately under the same roof. And it worked for a period of time. Rugby was still the thing that I was pursuing. Personal training became a way for me to fund myself back into being a professional rugby player. I could buy the food that I needed, train when I needed, buy the supplementation, like get myself back in. I was basically living like a professional athlete, but I was funding myself. So I was my employer. And again, I won't go down the rugby route again, but that all took off and rugby became the thing for a few years. But PT had carried on, had the studio, and that's kind of, I guess, where the entrepreneurial stuff had sort of began to gather momentum. Working for myself, building a business, understanding that, you know, the bits and pieces that you need that aren't just service delivery, the marketing, the sales, customer service, and all along that time, social media was beginning to become a bit more prevalent. I was still going to the body powers and just watching the way the industry was moving and who was doing well and what were they doing different. But it was all very much influenced.
Ollie, were you sponsors at all? Because a couple of questions just to break that up. Number one, I remember when I was a personal trainer, very busy in the gym, and I had this thing in my brain that was, I don't want to work in a gym anymore. I want my own studio. I did that, right? And I'm really interested because I still believe wholeheartedly is, as you enter the fitness industry, getting in the gym for the first year or two, if you do want to go online, is still a very smart thing to do. But I had something in me that said I want my own studio. What was that? What was the thing that made you go, no, I need to get out of the gym and have my own thing?
I think when you just stay on the surface of that question, you think that is the logical next step. It's like a lot of people, like, the next step needs to be go online. The next step needs to be, I need to become a mentor. Like, you need to dig into why. For me, it comes back to who I wanted to be as a coach and the results I wanted to get people. So I loved writing a program that was bespoke, bit of a wanky word, used too much, but I like writing individualized programs for people. So I loved the consultation process. I loved trying to problem solve of what they were doing in the past, putting together some cool programming, and then being able to coach them through it. I could do that in the leisure centre at certain hours, but at 6 p.m. on a Monday evening, if I had written a program for someone, you come in, I might be left with a bit of floor space, a mat, and a 5-kilogram dumbbell. So I was getting frustrated with the fact that I couldn't deliver the service that I wanted. I needed to build a gym where I knew where the equipment was, so I could write a program that met that individual where they're at and where they're trying to go, and that I could build on week on week. Otherwise, I felt like a fraud, because why am I charging one person £50 an hour, the same as the next person? But with that person, we've got run of the mill of the gym, and with this person, I'm in the corner somewhere with, scratching my head with what I can do with them, and I'm almost making the session up on the fly. I know for a lot of people, that's the norm, and they don't really care as long as they pick up the paycheck. But for me, that wasn't going to fly. That wasn't. Again, if I think about my dad being a surgeon and what a profession should be like, and what a professional how should they act, how should they behave, how should they view their business, I didn't feel like a professional in that leisure centre. To your point, 110%, I would not change the experience that it gave me. All of a sudden, you've got unlimited footfall to a degree. You're coming into contact with all different types of people. You get the different demographics at different times of the day. So you're learning how to talk to different people that train early in the morning versus the people that train at 9 a.m. versus the people that train at 6. So it's a really, really good internship into becoming a coach. And I think if you skip that step, which most people do now, you will really struggle. Or if you go for the instant gratification, you will have a short-lived career, and the groundwork that I think is what it takes. Again, when you look at people like myself, like yourself, and the other people that are still in the industry 10, 15, 20 years down the line, they all came through that apprenticeship, and being on a gym floor is part of that, I believe.
What do you think that the gym floor gives a coach that we are not seeing in in a immediate online coach nowadays?
Confidence. Again, the reason I was so confident is because when you get busy and you're getting people results, you start to believe in your product. You start to iterate. You start to work on it. You see inefficiencies, and I think it's confidence. That confidence comes from getting people in front of your result. There's nowhere to hide. When someone comes in, they go, you know what, I'm not quite feeling it today because of X, Y, and Z, and you're able to think on the fly and still give that person a great result. It's just so much, it's confidence, and confidence comes from the experience that you gain. Whereas when you go online, you're vying for people's attention. It's sometimes a little bit slower unless you've got a big pool of people to pull from, and that might be a following that you've built from a previous career or life where you've almost been given that following. and now you're trying to monetize it from a fitness perspective, but you don't have the experience from a fitness perspective. So I think it's confidence and experience and access to try things with people in person. And I don't think, like I said, there's nothing better than being in person. Even when you have a meeting, even when you meet someone, you know what it's like. Things get lost in translation. Things don't quite land how you wanted them to. Whether you're just having a conversation with someone about anything, or whether you're trying to coach them fitness, seeing, adjusting, tweaking, did your cues work? How did that person receive something? I don't think you can replace that.
And I think potentially, and this is not the case for everybody, when somebody who is less confident and less skilled and hasn't got that much knowledge as a personal trainer or an actual coach goes online, the number one thing you have to learn is digital marketing, because you're not going to get a client. And then you become obsessed with, right, this digital marketing is going to get me more clients. Whereas in the gym, the only thing that's going to get you more clients is becoming better. So there's that kind of like, when you moved into your studio, while you were there, were you consciously starting to build your personal brand? Because to have amassed the following, I remember for me when I'm showing my age now, but when Facebook just started, I was like, okay, cool. Now I just need to document. Were you actively documenting that early on, and being conscious about the kind of personal brand that you were starting to build?
Yeah, I think the word document is such a great word for it, and I've used it a lot with. I was documenting a lot, at times perhaps too much. When I think back to the amount of Instagram stories that I was putting out, and it was actually Snapchat where I think I first started. But yeah, it was document. I wanted to become an online coach. I wanted to start this online coaching thing, because I had this audience and I wanted to try and impart some of the stuff that I was doing in the gym with these people. Online coaching wasn't really a thing back then that was like a career. And where it all sort of changed for me was when I left rugby at 26. I moved over to Santa Monica in LA for about 4 or 5 months. And the reason I hadn't started doing much on social media as a coach before then, because I was afraid of people going to take the piss out of me. I was afraid my rugby mates in the changing room were going to start to, give me banter. And I don't know why I thought that being in America could change that, because they could still contact me. But I went to America, and that's where I first started actively trying to push this online coaching thing, because I was away from I still have my studio business. I left it to my mate for the summer to look after. He was a strength and conditioning coach within rugby, and the team were, it was out of season. So he looked after my clients. I went to America and I started doing a bit more online coaching there. So I started picking up some clients. But I realized that I could now use social media to impact people, add value to the platform, talk about the things that I was very interested about. I was, everyone talks about this being known, liked, and trust. I naturally probably overshared on socials. I'd talk about training, I'd talk about family, I'd talk about how I was feeling. I'd document pretty much my day, and it became like a daily vlog, subconsciously, where all of those things compounding over time were giving me success in my career, in who I wanted to be, in my physique, in the way I felt. So I almost just became a routine. I'm just going to keep documenting this stuff, more so for myself, but it was obviously then having an impact on followership and impacting those followers. And I was starting to monetize it with selling online programming. But yeah, it was a conscious effort. I was probably an early adopter back then, but I certainly haven't been an early adopter to things like TikTok and Threads and other platforms. I've tried, but I very much play almost exclusively on Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn, because I can't get my head around trying to do all of them.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that studio and the online, I'm guessing that the Marchon gym actually started after the online. So just in order of kind of how you've developed the kind of the entrepreneurial journey with the products and offerings, did you go close the studio and then open Marchon Gym on your own?
Exactly. So came back from America. I actually thought I was going to go to America, and that was going to be me. I was going to be out there, American dream, West Coast. I knew that fitness was massive, and I knew that trainers, coaches were were held in a higher regard than what I was seeing here in the UK. In the UK, it was still very much about physique competitors going online and selling fitness. There was a couple of guys that had cool gyms, you said M10, and there were, UP, and there were some cool gyms around, but I didn't quite know how I was going to get a gym of that scale. So I went to America thinking, strength conditioning and fitness was bigger. long story short, came back because LA probably wasn't the best place for me to try and base myself out of, and I realized that I had a good thing going back home. So I came back and I started back at the studio. I got to a stage where I was doing about 50-hour weeks, as most people end up doing that are successful coaches. And what you find is that you're burnt out. You're close to burnout. You're earning loads of cash, but you don't know what to do with the cash. You don't want to spend the cash because you realize how hard you've worked for it. You don't want to go on holiday because you're thinking about loss of earnings. Your product shit because you're trying to deliver 10 hours of coaching. So I'd gone through that whole journey of, now I was just doing too much, and how do I get out of, how do I get out of there? What is the next step? And the next step for me was try and start a gym and build a team. I transitioned out of rugby, and the thing I love most about rugby is that you're with your mates left and right of you. You've got teammates. So I'd always been brought up on this team culture, and as a one-to-one practitioner in coaching, I felt very isolated. So that's where the original iteration of the gym, Marchon Athletics, started. And I approached this friend of mine who had been looking after my clients. He'd been working for sort of 4 or 5 years, working his way up through the professional ranks of strength and conditioning and rugby. Now, you don't get paid much, and the jobs at the top end are few and far between. So I was able to tempt him across. And my brother, who was very passionate about fitness, he was at a bit of a loose end, to be honest. I said, look, do you want to do your PT quals and come on board with us? So the three of us started this gym. We were starting to play with the model a little bit. So we'd gone from one-to-one personal training into a semi-private small group PT. The online stuff had been built, like I said, over my time in America. We carried that on. So we had Marchon Athletic as a gym in Harpenden, which was small group personal training. We just got our price point right. We didn't start charging cheap rates like what most people do for small group PT. We kept it at premium. We put everyone on direct debits on subscriptions back in 2016. We started to build this membership base. The gym was open from 6 a.m. through to 9 p.m. and you could pretty much book a slot all day, every day, bar a few select hours. So we gave people the freedom and flexibility to book in. We were very good on community. We were experts at writing programs and delivering it. What we didn't really have is the operational brain around how do you run a gym that suddenly got 60, 70, 80, 90 members. These are personal training members, right? Not just members that kind of rock in. And then the online business was called Marchon Performance, because we believed we had this demographic that we served in person, slightly older, corporate type people, a couple of kids in Hertfordshire, Harpenden. And then online, we had this younger demographic who probably initially followed me for my rugby, and then my athleticism, and my physique, and how could we service them. So we started these 12-week training programs, which eventually went into group training programs, because again, I saw the benefit of, can I get someone on a subscription? Can I get monthly recurring revenue? How do I retain them? Can I start to think about the lifetime value? So we had these two gyms, basically. One was an online gym and one was a brick and mortar in-person gym. And then it became about, okay, the three of us are maxed out here. Then it's about more personnel. So we didn't get it completely right in the first 9 months of having the gym. But after 9 months, I understood that I needed to employ people. I needed people to play for the badge on the front of their chest, not the name on their back. Most people make the mistake that they either charge a PT rent or the PT is self-employed, but working for a gym. For us, we wanted everyone to be playing for the badge. Everyone was employed. Everyone was on contracts. Everyone had the ability to go on holiday and be paid for it. And again, going back to this, what does a profession look like? How does a fitness professional operate? Having holiday, booking in the haircut when he wants to book in a haircut, having a night off and going on a date with their missus, all those sort of things were things that we wanted to get right. So, and we did within that first 2016 to 2017, and everything just sort of took off from there.
Do you think that the aspect of and I think a lot of coaches don't really look at this, how important has that intentional personal branding been now? Because I personally think over the next 5 years plus, mastering the personal branding, and Ollie Marchon is unique in himself. And the ability for you to be able to scale these things. Now you've got SUPs and you've got the app and you've got everything. It all comes back to, I know you've got the Marchon brand, and I'm sure part of you is like, okay, let's drop the Ollie bit and let's see if we can see how strong that is on its own. But, coaches' identity and their personal brand and their uniqueness, is this something that you drill into consistently to ensure that we're maximizing reach through you, or are you trying to allow Marchon to do that now?
Personal brand is huge. Again, people are going to have their own biases. I can only talk about my lived experiences. And if I think about the success that I had in the first 5 years of my 5 years of Marchon, so let's say 2016 to 2021, before we ever even knew what I knew what paid ads were, but before we ever spent a penny on paid ads, the business was built exclusively on referrals, word of mouth, and people knowing who we were and knowing that we were good at what we did. And that came from personal brand and activating ourselves on social media. I've obviously done it arguably the best out of our coaching team, but everyone is tasked with building their personal brand from the moment they join us. Because the best thing that I can do with Marchon for the people that come on and join the company is they can leverage Marchon because it will naturally put them on a bit of a pedestal because they're wearing that badge. We can leverage them if their personal brand grows, and they're bringing more value to us in turn. We can give them more value. But equally, if it all goes tits up tomorrow, they could walk into anywhere in the world and get a job because they've represented Marchon, and in that time they built their own personal stock. So it's something that I'm very passionate about people doing. I do sometimes think about where would could Marchon still operate at the level in which it does without me? But I've been shown a few circumstances. So the gym in Harpenden, for example, I never thought I could not work in that gym and it still grow. I first moved off the coaching floor in 2019, no impact at all. I now have, for the last couple of years, I've had no real influence in that gym other than a bit of strategy. But again, no influence at all. And the gym grows happily without anyone knowing who I am. So it can be done. But again, if I think about my safety blanket personally, if Marchon closed down tomorrow, I want to make sure that I've still got relevance, credibility, and a passion for building my own personal brand. Hence the podcast, hence conversations, hence speaking gigs, hence all of that stuff. I think that's very important. If I look at all the guys who are uber successful in the world, the founders of big companies, it looks to me like a lot of those companies now aren't faceless. There's a face behind them, or there's multiple faces. So if we remove me from the conversation, just look at people who are properly successful, they've adopted a similar way of doing things. I think the days of the big corporate companies that are faceless, I think it's harder to start a company like that now. I think companies need people so that people can buy into those individuals.
And what is it, if you and I were to sit with a group of coaches right now and just say, what are some of the top 3 things from a personal branding perspective that you're still today as intentional about as you were when you first went on social media? What would those things be to a coach that's maybe in their first 1 to 5 years? Because to me, identity, influence, and impact does come back to what you've said, this personal brand that you're trying to create of yourselves. And very often I see coaches that are frustrated that they're not where they want to be. And I take one look and I'm like, my friend, just make something of yourself, because then I'm going to buy into you. What are 3 of the things that are very intentional that you've done that you say, Ollie Marchon brand wouldn't be this without these 3 things?
Yeah, hopefully these are going to be helpful, but some of them probably aren't what people want to hear because it's not particularly sexy. The first one is like delay gratification, because again, when I started back on Snapchat, I didn't have much interaction. I didn't have loads of followers. It was never like it is now. But delay gratification, and it's not about being well known. My following, 150,000 people, isn't massive when you look at in the grand scheme of things. But they are so bought in that Marchon Training, our online business, hit some really crazy numbers without ever spending a penny. That was all just from having a following that was really bought into me. That point 2 here is consistency, that knew that I was going to show up. And if they asked me a question in the DMs, or if they were following me for a certain reason, they knew that each day they were going to get a little dose of that reason, because I was going to show up. I wasn't going to take a day. I was never going to take a day off. Even when I'm on holiday, I will rarely take a day off. The things that I show up to put out on social media. Again, that's not for everyone, and I'm not professing that is the way you do things, but that's what my audience can expect. They can trust that I'm going to be there and I'm consistent. So delay gratification, think about where you could be in 5 years with your personal brand if you showed up every day, which is point 2 in consistency. Point 3, I think people get too caught up in worrying about what their niche is and all that kind of stuff. Show people what you're passionate about, and hopefully the thing that you're passionate about can help other people, right? So some form of education, adding value and depositing something of value onto the platform before you ever think about trying to ask for something in return. We talk about, for every one extraction you take from the marketplace with, trying to sell something or get someone to part with their attention or money, make sure you're adding 10 back in. The other thing would be, as I said, it's not about being well known, it's about being known well. So show people what you're interested in, show people a little bit about you personally, so you're not a robot, and people can start to understand that yes, you might be an expert and look a certain way and a great coach, but what is it, the other things that make you up, family, kids, relationships. Some people don't want to put that stuff on social media, and I'm all for that, but it's what's, I think, given me the most success is that people genuinely feel like they know me, and when they meet me, I try and give them the same Ollie that then was on social media. So I've got these people that trust in me that much for the right reasons, that when I do have something that I want to try and sell them because I genuinely believe that it's going to change their life in some way, they invariably buy it.
I love that. What do you, aligned with this kind of personal branding still, what do you struggle with personally? What do you struggle with today? Because this entrepreneurial journey, I'm in that world. What do you struggle with? Because naturally there's this imposter syndrome. Everyone looks at this painting rosy picture. What do you struggle with and how do you deal with it?
In a professional sense?
Yeah.
I think there's probably times where I'm probably trying to do too many things at once, and there's a danger that I could be doing things more efficiently and getting some things done before I move on to the next thing. And I make excuses for that because I like variety, and I feel as I've built this huge capacity for work. Mm-hmm. That sometimes you glorify that, and you're doing too many things at once because you think as though that mentality and being that busy is what success looks like. I'm not as bad as I used to be. I actually burnt myself out sort of my late 20s, about 30, 31 years old, where I realized I'd taken that mentality too far. But I think I'm very lucky now because, like I said, subconsciously or consciously, I built a team of people where there are really good people that are better than me within the business that I can now pass things over to. So to a large extent, work for me can sometimes be a bit, it's like flow. The bit where I struggle is not necessarily professionally, because I feel as I've got most things figured out with the team that I've got and the experience that I've got. Where I struggle is more so with my young kids. I don't feel, if I look at my identity as a father, there's things that I want to be doing better in terms of time with the kids and taking them to the after school clubs that my wife does, that I'm not doing, and that can eat away at me sometimes. And again, like you fear that you're going to get a little bit further down the track and you look back and go, fuck, I should have not worked as long that day or as hard that day and prioritize those things. But I don't think it will become painful enough until it's too late. That's what I probably struggle with.
I watched Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there was the bit on aging where he talked about time, and they talked about time with their children, but he's so obsessive about his work and what he does. And similarly with myself, I'm like, I love it. I love what I do. I'm inspired by what I do. You said, it may be too late, but is there a part of you that's, a lot of people feel quite frustrated that they're working on their business all the time, and maybe they feel that these things that they don't get time to do as much on, they suffer from? Do you get feelings like that where you're like, I want to keep building this thing, but I'm not giving certain things enough time? Or are you just okay with, look, right now it's all about the pursuit of building the business?
I think it's the latter. I think because my wife does such a good job, and she doesn't really get on my case unless it's like really urgent or evident that I'm being a bit of a dick as it relates to like spending more time with the kids and her. Which, like I said, at weekends, and I'm in a very intense period of work right now because we've got a few new things that we're doing. But ordinarily, I can get home for sort of 5:30, so I would be with the kids, and at weekends I am around. But I hope that I've got this vision that in a few years' time, I will be fairly financially free, and that Marchon will be a well-established entity, and that by 40, 45, I'll have a bit more. I'll have the free. I'll have literally as much freedom as I desire. So I think some people sacrifice in the front end for potentially the rewards at the back end. Now, a lot of people obviously tell you, don't work all your life to 65 just to try and enjoy 5 years where you're still mobile and able. But I'm bringing that forward. I think within the next 5 years, I should be there. That's not to say that I'm going to slow down in any capacity, but I'll have the freedom to choose, or more freedom to choose. Arguably, I have that now, but it goes back to the potential thing. It's like if I rest on my laurels now, we won't hit that potential and we won't go there. So it's horses for courses. Everyone's going to be different in their mentality towards their work life, their family life, and even their own health and well-being. But for me, I work in intense periods on business. I try and keep a balance with my kids and the family. It's sometimes unbalanced, but it's the nature of the beast.
And you think that is, it comes with the territory of entrepreneurship. So it's almost unrealistic to try and expect, if you're trying to get somewhere, that you can kind of have both sides equally, because you're trying to push for this bigger thing, right?
100%. I mean, I know no different. I'm yet to see anyone that's kind of shown me a different path.
Yeah.
Again, if we think about the greats in anything that I'm passionate about, sport, when I think about how hard I had to train, because I was never the most gifted, never the biggest, never the quickest. I had to work really hard. When you think about the Ronaldos of this world and how many hours you think they still put in. So you just apply the same sort of the things that you observe and the things that the inputs that you've got from people that you want to try and emulate in their field. You've got to work fucking hard. And I think in the fitness game now, there's a lot of people with a bigger voice, more notoriety, a bigger pool, larger followings. So and the industry moves fast, and the consumers are getting more educated. So for me, it's the only way I know, but it's also almost the success that you start to have confirms the biases that you have, and you kind of keep going. And like I said, maybe further down the line you gain some perspective when it's too late. But I think that's part of life. I think they're the lessons you learn along the way.
Along your journey, I like to try and paint a realistic picture to coaches. I've certainly had I call them emotional challenges, because I don't think that I've been unstable in any way, shape, or form. I've just gone through normal personal challenges. What would be the biggest personal, emotional challenge that you've dealt with since you've had the gym and all the way through so far, that coaches, people do run into these problems? Like what have you run into personally where you've had to take either stock, delve into something to eradicate either some way you feel about yourself or something that was kind of standing in your way? What personal work have you had to do on yourself at that particular time?
I think there's a few moments I draw upon. I mentioned to you sort of burnout. So going into this entrepreneurial thing where I'd started the gym and I basically put all the cash that I had that I could afford to put in, I put that into the gym. It was about £40,000, and I had a year's rolling lease. So to put all your sort of life savings in on something and only having a year, like I said, the pain of doing 50 hours a week and doing the one-to-one stuff was so much so that I was like, I need to throw a Hail Mary. And starting this little gym was the original Marchon Athletic. That was my Hail Mary. But then when you soon do it, and then you're trying to be this entrepreneur, I've gone from being this coach to now you think about being an entrepreneur and a business owner, and you start listening to podcasts and reading books, and you start hustling a little bit too hard. I just fucking burnt myself out physically and mentally, was just like exhausted. So that, I think that was probably the first time. That was a really, really, really important lesson to learn about a bit more about balance and knowing that you're just not a superhuman. Everyone has their breaking point. I think thereafter, things I've found challenging is as a team, dealing with people is pretty tough, particularly when you have employees where you're managing their financial aspirations, their personal aspirations, their professional aspirations. That can be tough. So communication is really key, and building a team requires a level of maturity, and you need to adopt a bit more of a corporate mindset in terms of the way you conduct meetings and the cadence of the meetings and the documentation of those meetings. So people management has sometimes, because we're a very tight knit team, that can sometimes draw on your emotion a little bit, because you want the best for people, but also you've got to protect the business and you've got to protect your aspirations. So that's been at times challenging, but we've worked through all those. I think the natural one for a lot of people is overwhelm. So many things to do and so little time to try and do it. Everything needs to be done now, and not knowing where to focus the attention. But I think the best thing for those things, Mark, if I'm honest, and I know you offer these services, is mentorship. I truly believe that the biggest impact I had as an athlete was the mentorship of coaches in the gym and on the field. I believe that the success in the early days of my gym in 2016 was through a guy called JC, who you might know, John Claude.
Yeah.
He was yeah. So in the first sort of, I tried to do it by myself, as anyone would who's young and got a bit of an ego, and then JC sort of gave me a few pointers and put me on a good path. And now over the last sort of 5-6 years, we do a lot of mentorship with gym owners. So and I still have business coaches, more so from the corporate world now, and we're also looking at board of advisors and chairmen and those kind of things. So I think the best thing is, I do think getting your fingers burnt every now and again is a valuable lesson, right? Because you realise that you do need help and you're not unbreakable. But I think coaching is the most important thing to work through those overwhelm, and someone just to sense check your strategy and just to give you a reality check every now and again.
And it's okay, therefore, I think what you've just said, to me, overwhelm is not something we need to get rid of, but it may be a very clear sign that you could do with somebody looking over what you're doing and adjusting the strategy, or almost learning something about what you're struggling with right now, right?
Yeah, again, it's a bit cliche, but if we think about fitness, it's not necessarily overtraining, it's the lack of recovery in whatever sense that might be, the sleep, the nutrition, the strategies that you're putting in place. In business and overwhelm, it's not necessarily that you're like the volume of work can be managed if you understand the strategy in which you should go through it, and the time in which it should take, and the level of detail that you need to go to, and your ability to manage all of those stresses, which I think sometimes requires an objective view and someone who's either been there or done it is further down the track that can impart that knowledge to you. So whilst I've sort of experienced it all, I think the solution to it is coaching and having industry peers and people around you that you can either emulate or can give you some guidance.
No, I love that, and certainly for me, it's even recently I just took on a new mentor. I'm 46, right? We took on a new company to come in and help us build one part of the company that I know that I needed external help from. A subject that's quite taboo, Ollie, in the fitness industry, and one which I'm really conscious about helping coaches build a better relationship with, is the subject of money and being okay with charging your worth, earning as you progress through your career, and getting a reward for what you do. How has your relationship with money and earning changed? And also now, what does money mean to Ollie?
Good question. Again, take you back to 14. Took my first job washing dishes in a kitchen, and ever since I always wanted to earn money. I remember even before that, a young lad finding my dad's paychecks and being like, "Fucking look at the money. How do I get to a stage where I can earn that sort of money?" And I remember looking at the tax in which he was paying and all these things. And like I say, my uncles being business owners, it was always around the word business was always brought up. So business and money have always been something that I've been around. I don't feel as though I've ever had a negative or gross relationship with money, because I think any money that I've ever earned, I've worked really hard to earn it. And I think the more expertise you gain and the more education you gain, the more experience you gain and the better results you get people, and the bigger impact you have, that should come at a price to people. And you should get your rewards for that. And as I got into personal training, you start training people who are very successful, and they're talking about their 4 holidays every year and the fact they've gone to Disneyland and it costs them 30 grand because they all fly first class, and the cars that they drive. You start to think, how do I get a piece of this? Could I ever go on 4 holidays every year? Could I ever put my kids in private school? Could I ever fly first class? And I didn't see a path for that as a personal trainer, because you kind of work out how many hours you've got, and you work out what you're charging, and you work out the sort of cap. Well, that doesn't go that. You can still live a very nice life, and you can get to the six figures that people want to get to over time. But I was like, how do I push beyond that? So understanding business and understanding scale and understanding growth was something that I wanted more from I wanted the opportunity to experience all of those things. It wasn't necessarily about a particular figure in terms of what that financial number was. But then at the same time, I was like, I'm never going to be the person that's going to fly first class. I don't see the point. Right? I don't see the point in a 10-hour flight or a 7-hour flight to Dubai and spending $2,000 or $2.5 grand, whatever it may be. But then as you start to experience the success and earn more money, all of a sudden you start to become accustomed to being able to do those things, and you start doing them. I hope I'm sort of answering your question in a roundabout way. So I've kind of been through all. I think in my early career, when I started earning some money, you just spend money on stupid shit. And then you realize the power that money has, because it's about ego and wearing the latest trainers or buying the latest Rolex watch, and it's about status. And then you realize it's not all about those things. It's actually more about the freedom to do things that you enjoy doing. And then I think you get to a stage where you realize that you're actually just genuinely really good at what you do. And that then comes with the confidence to charge more money. And the money will be what the money will be, based on your impact and your value that you can put in the marketplace. And really then you're like, well, there's no glass ceiling. I can charge whatever I want, so long as I can get the person the result that they want. And I think if you can then start a business where you can unlock scale, and you can start to productize yourself in different ways, then you can start to think about different revenue streams and things. But I think now when you build a company and people start telling you about an exit, or what is your exit and how can you build it so that you can raise money and all those things, and you start to be around those sort of conversations, the people you hang around with then make you think differently, and you think about business differently. I never thought I could build a business that one day someone might buy. That was never. It was just about kicking out some money that me and the people that work for the business could live off. So you sort of go up the levels, and then you obviously experience bigger devils, but you have bigger conversations, and your mindset sort of it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
And do you think I mean, throughout my career, one of the things that I've always been adamant about is the more that I charge, the bigger pool I get to play in. And that's certainly happened throughout my career. I can see it categorically. You just talked about coaching people that are wealthier. You don't get that charging £30 an hour for a PT. Suddenly when you're charging the 40 to 50, you start networking with clients that tell other people, and then they eventually want to pay you 60 and 70. And online, if you charge in a certain amount, to me, I certainly started to have these conversations with really great people. And they were, like you were saying, having the bigger holidays, spending the bigger things. It's almost each time you see your worth and charge a little bit more, it's not just about how much money comes in your pocket. It's also access to a different level of thinking. And so do you think as well, in this journey that you've gone through, it's, you talk about this phase where the Rolexes and thinking you want to get the cars. Do you think that's a phase that people should avoid at all costs, or is just an inevitability that if you suddenly get 10 grand a month and you go, I want to buy that thing for myself? And I think it's a very normal phase that the clothes then become the cars, then become it's more about my kids.
Yeah. Look, I think rewarding yourself for hitting certain milestones and having goals in mind is really important, right? You've got to show gratitude to the journey, and whatever your vice is. I'm not into cars. Until last year when we opened the gym in East London, I didn't drive. I walked everywhere, come rain or shine. In the middle of winter, I walked everywhere, and it would invariably end up at the destination soaking wet and freezing cold, because I'm not interested in cars. I've got a bit of a love for watches, and I've got a good watch collection. But again, for me, it's not about, I don't flash those watches. I'm not a flashy person. It's more about their investments now, and I can make some money on those things. I think the important bit that I missed that's come with earning more money is going back to the impact I want to have in the industry, and who I want Marchon to represent is we've been able to hire best-in-class coaches and put them on proper salaries because we've made some money. We've been able to build arguably two of the best private training facilities in the UK in terms of the fit out and the experience. because we made some money. We've been able to invest hundreds of thousands of pounds in our own app, and own the technology so that the experience for the user is exactly how we want it. And we have 2 developers internally because we made some money. And obviously with that then comes the bigger impact, and more money then comes in the other side. But we've been able to continually invest into who we are and the services that we give out, whether it's in our education, whether it's in our coaches, whether it's in the way we deliver our services, whether it's in our gyms. So I think the best thing about trying to build a business that's profitable is that you have cash, whether it's to spend on to give yourself a gift, to celebrate the success and recognize it, or to put it back into your next phase of learning, or to hire the mentor that now is $2,000 a month. All these things that you think you can't do. If you earn money, you can now start to put that money back into your business, and that'll be the best investment you ever make. So everything people see of Marchon it's been purely bootstrapped and money going back in. We haven't lived a lavish lifestyle. I mean, we have a level of security and we can put food on the table, but everything's been about how do we make Marchon better? How do we make it more robust? How do we increase the infrastructure and the personnel that we have within the business?
And you delay that desire necessarily to spank it on things that are depreciables, because the vision is bigger than what you're spending it on, and you're not wasting it. Because at the end of the day, to me, if I could spend 20 grand on a new mentor that's going to help us put an infrastructure into the business, that's going to give me another X amount per month revenue to the business, which means we can then hire a new person in a particular area, I value that way more, even still right now, than just throwing it away. And I think that comes to necessarily having a bigger vision and, trying to push that vision. Because if you get to a certain place and think, right, well, now I can afford to just get rid of it, you're not really thinking about the long-term goal, which obviously you've got a huge one for, a huge vision. Ollie, I always love to get to a point of the podcast where I ask a question that's aligned with the title of the podcast, and something that for me I'm so passionate about, which is the term mastery. What does the term mastery mean to Ollie?
A great question. I think mastery is a continued pursuit, and it's intentional. I think you're never going to become. Everyone talks about the 10,000 hours, right? So,
yep.
Mastery, I don't think is again, it's not a destination. I don't think anyone can actually say they're a master. It's like everyone's saying, world leading, all that kind of stuff. It's all subjective. So I think knowing that it's a subjective measure, it's a continued pursuit around education. It's a continued pursuit around your ability to be consistent and be the person that people can trust in, that you're always going to be there. I think it's about showing up and giving your best every day, that intentional action, purposeful. And I think it also links back to the mindset. I think you've got to view yourself as wanting to be the best. Whether you ever get there or not, you've got to want to be the best. You've got to want to stand out. You've got to have a key point of difference. So yeah, a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but again, the reason I don't attach myself to things like that, like I want to be a master, is because I'm so journey-centric. Like probably to the question that you asked before, my intention coming to fitness industry is again linking back to this, like what does a profession look like and what does a career look like stretched out over years? For me, the goal was only ever, I just want to make sure that I've got something that I can continually get a salary from until I'm 60. Right? It was a secure. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a security piece first. I just want to be able to get paid until I'm 60. And the only way I thought I could do that is by continual education, investment into education, showing up, doing something I'm passionate about forever. And that might then take different forms as I get older and go through different stages of life. But like continue to have that as my North Star. Am I waking up and being engaged and passionate about the thing? And the other thing was like not just an investment into education, but an investment back into what the service was, so that it stayed best in class and it stayed ahead of the trends.
I love that. And just to wrap up, Ollie, which I think is really important in terms of relevance, we talked about this earlier on, the fitness industry. You're having big conversations with people, I'm sure, on a week-to-week basis around kind of where we see it. You and I have gone from being PTs when no one talked about online to this online thing starting. And I remember doing my program called 8 Week Physique and crushing it. And then now everybody's doing 8 week challenges. And back then for me, it was just a natural way of upselling somebody into online coaching. So where's the fitness industry now, Ollie? Where are we going in the next 5 years? What are you gonna what are we seeing?
I think it's the land of opportunity. I think it's really exciting. I think the cream are rising to the top. I think it's as much as the Wild West as it always has been in terms of people coming in with the wrong intentions and not really much substance. So they'll get some short-term success, but sticking around probably isn't going to be something that they've thought about in how to stick around, and it's not something I think they're going to experience. I think the need for community is the most important thing. Now, whether you can build that community online or whether you're building it physically in a brick and mortar facility or in a gym where you might work, that's the thing I think you need to focus your attention on. It's impact, community, and a sense of belonging, that there's something bigger than the individual and bigger than yourself. I think adopting technology is really, really important. Everyone's talking about AI and all those kind of things, but I think using it to your advantage and not resisting it is very important, not being threatened by it. And I think the way you can overcome the threats is by the community piece. But I think it's exciting. I think for us, our goal is to continue growing online. That's the biggest part of our business now. But the tangible experiences, the brick and mortar, or the if you're exclusive in online coaches, you're just going to run in-person events, right? It's bringing your community together for an event of sorts, whether it's training, whether it's education, whatever it may be. But I think the in-person stuff is just as important as it ever was. I've seen the stats on the growth or the success of some of the gyms and the participation rates, and they're going up. So I think it's more of the same, but I think you've got to have substance, you've got to have education, and I think it would be a good idea to have some sort of guidance and being a part of something where there's a peer group where you can find your tribe. I think that's going to be very necessary for you to stay motivated and to have people that you can bounce ideas off.
Do you think PTs have got any reason to worry about the brick and mortar personal training businesses and gyms' attention to detail when it comes to personal training? Because we know, I teach a lot of online coaching. We teach that's thriving and flourishing. A lot of messages are received. PT isn't where it's at now. And I said to them, no. Online's where it's at for some people, but PT's where it's at for other people. Are you still giving PTs a lot of confidence that it's thriving in gyms?
110%. I think if we look at the online, audience in terms of who you might coach online, and this isn't not exclusively right, but most of the people that you're going to coach online are going to be slightly younger. They're not going to be as established. They're probably outcome driven, and your retention rates and your lifetime value are going to be, unless you've got years in the game, are going to be less than if you can pick up a PT client who's more settled in life, has some disposable income. They're thinking more about the journey and how they can offset their life over the next 3-5 years, and the fact that they've just become a father or a mother, etc. So I think the in-person PT clients are the ones that are going to pay you more money per hour and are going to stick around for longer. What you need to be conscious of it or try is have a nice balance of both, this sort of hybrid coaching, and or reverse engineer from how many hours you want to do, how much you want to earn, and get your price points right from the get-go, or at least make sure you're on a trajectory to be able to hit those price points. But in-person coaching is certainly not dead, and I think it's easy pickings for people that are good at it.
Good at it. Ollie, I'm going to be very respectful of your time and your day as you're getting started in London. This has been a conversation that I've been looking forward to having. And just for everybody who just wants to find, I know we've talked a lot about Marchon throughout this, but how do people find about you, learning about you? If you're a gym owner, you want to get some help or even coaching, how do they find out about you?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I do hope it's been relevant to the audience. Best places to find me is probably Instagram at Ollie Marchon. It's OLLIE MARCHON. You find me on there, and you'll probably soon see all the Marchon stuff because I'm often posting about it. But mate, I appreciate having the opportunity to come on with you today.
Honestly, it's been a long time coming, and I'm very, very grateful for your time. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, mate.